harassment was centered around the city of Garden Grove and in Anaheim. I lived in Garden Grove. We had a home in Garden Grove, and we worked nearby. Some details about the typical car-stalking recruit. Recruits tend to be blue-collar workers who are at the bottom end of the job scale. They are janitors in apartments, hotels, etc., who have keys to get in any locked door. They are security guards who can let fellow members into places where they would not normally be allowed to go. They are city workers who can, in many cities, follow a target around all day in their vehicles or have a noisy project underway near his target's residence. They are taxi drivers who are a network that is always on the road. They are cable, telephone, electric company employees who can interfere with a target service and spend time on patrol with the group while they are on the job. And this reminded me of the fact that in the place that I worked, there was a certain person that will remain nameless who was kind of a blowhard, and he talked about, and also one of his relatives worked at the Garden Grove Police Department, and he bragged about the fact that he used to, I don't know if he used to work at a cable phone company, but he used to brag about helping to put wiretaps on people's phones for law enforcement. So that's what this little comment here in this sentence reminded me of when I read it. The other thing interesting about this particular employee, he was an RF engineer type fella. And take a wild guess what one of his hobbies was. Yep, ham radio stuff. So it's almost like this web page is writing the history of my life. Anyway, let me go through here and find where I left off. Okay, so those are the author's words. Here are some of a few quotes from the perpetrators themselves from the original book. From the book Terrorism, Stalking in America, here is what some of the people that are involved in this harassment have to say. We are like the police, except we are above the police. We are a citizens group that helps the police. We are trying to alert people in the area about this person, the target, before he gets to do what he did in the last place he lived. And then this is a comment from Eleanor White that's added. All the car-stalking targets I know well did not commit any offenses. The stalkers are filled with lies by their leaders. Okay, continuing with the book Terrorism, Stalking in America, when I get the call, and this is again one of the harassers, when I get the call, I go to whatever the address is. It doesn't matter what they, the targets, do, they can never get away from us. Another quote from the book, again by one of the people that are engaged in this criminality. Who are we? We drive the ambulances that take you to the emergency room. When your house is burning, we put out the fire. We are security guards. We protect you at night. You only have electricity, phone, and cable service because of us. We are janitors. We have the keys. We fix your cars. You don't want to mess with us. And in the book Car Stalking, David Lawson provides some details about the motivations of stalking group members, not in the book. And that 25% follow the nominal cause they were recruited under. 25% actually participate in harassment. 75% harass occasionally or not at all. And 10% join out of fear of being harassed themselves. That 10% joining out of fear of harassment is quite interesting, as one of the most difficult barriers in educating the general public about organized stalking is why anyone would volunteer to harass others. Lawson describes recruits to these groups as those who feel powerless, inferior, and angry. Common sense is that naturally such people would be easy to recruit for street and adjacent to a target's home harassment, but I would comment that lots of professionals put us targets down at every opportunity, declaring us mentally ill for even suggesting organized stalking is possible. These professionals don't feel powerless, inferior, and angry. In other words, I think what he's trying to say there is that, yeah, there's a bunch of lowlifes that are involved in this sort of criminal harassment, but you can find just as many professionals as well involved in this garbage. And I can write a book about that one. And you've probably, if you've been following this channel, you've seen me show examples of security guards, even in this current apartment complex of mine, etc., community service type people, etc., that have been involved in this mayhem. And I continue, and I doubt the many utility and city employees who participate feel powerless, inferior, and angry either. Obviously they're employed, etc. So while David Lawson has done a great job, some aspects of organized stalking have apparently escaped him. And essentially, I think what they're trying to say here, and this is from my personal experience, is that this is not just a bunch of criminal lowlifes that have been enjoined in this, that this has been done in participation with some very supposedly respectable people in our society. I would say think Bernie Madoff if you want to have like a image in your mind of what I'm referring to, because you have people that are capable of doing incredible harm while dressed very nicely and expecting everyone to show them respect. Okay, and I continue. One comment Lawson makes is that firemen across the country and even some police officers support these groups, and I can vouch for that, since the principal form of harassment came at the hands of police officers and fire personnel, emergency personnel, in cooperation with criminal confidential informant types. Your Hispanic gang member looking individuals, white people that look like they were pretty much drug addicts, were operating under the assumption that these people were involved in some sort of crime, and they were basically co-opted into this as a way of getting out of whatever problem they had gotten themselves into with law enforcement. So you got those types of people as well. I have heard a number of reports that vehicular harassment has involved an above average number of vehicles that bear stickers of firefighters, or a few targets have traced perpetrator identities to firemen. One target discovered that a number of vehicular harassment cars identified by license number were parked in a police station parking lot. Again, for me, that's absolutely no surprise. My personal take on why some firemen and police might back these groups is that many have a heightened sense of community service. If they can be persuaded that the target has a criminal record, the worst case being that of a pedophile, it would be natural for firefighters and police to help keep the target in line. The author concludes, as explained at a number of places in the book, that the cause the typical group is working toward is mainly an excuse to get the groups together. The main motivation of members who stay with these groups is a sense of power and belonging the group members derive. Having a cause enhances the feelings of power and righteousness, but group members, according to the author, are most concerned with how their fellow group stalkers feel about their work and accept them. Lawson explains the attitude of the typical stalking group member towards the cause this way. Most active group members have only a general idea of the ideology of the group that they don't particularly care, but they don't particularly care. These groups come into being and are run by leaders. Here's what the author says about them in his book, a bit different and more clearly when compared to the original book. Group leaders do have political goals and the belief that the end justifies the means. Lawson describes leaders as considering their members disposable. And that comment there kind of reminds me, and it's something, someone made a comment somewhere, one of these blogs, you sound like you're me. But one of the things I've always kept in the back of my mind as I've been victimized in this way is that I don't consider myself just the victim of this. I consider the utter lack of disrespect for the trust of your fellow police officers, that the police leaders in this city and county would defecate on the trust of their police officers when they get them to be involved in this sort of garbage. So when Lawson says that the leaders consider their members disposable, it really makes sense. Orange County law enforcement leadership, as far as I'm concerned, has absolutely utter contempt and disrespect for the trust that their police officers have on them. And continuing, Lawson states that some leaders work for corporations and politicians. Lawson states that leaders identify targets but don't directly supervise the harassment group members. I'm sure about that. I've yet to see Stan Nee or Brad Gates and John Welter or Sandra Hutchins in any of these vehicles. Lawson describes leaders as having an air of mystery. Having worked for the CIA, NSA, or some other intelligence agency that doesn't reveal information about their employees, Lawson states that this background is likely mythology. And how about the financing for these groups? Although the author states that the pay is low, there are still very large expenses to harass people as thoroughly as targets report. Here an example of what I mean by large expenses. Groups are well financed. They can afford to rent property wherever the target lives. If he drives across the country, he will be followed by supporters of similar groups in that area. If he travels by plane, group members will meet him wherever he lands in the U.S. They may even accompany him on a plane if they know his travel plans, and there's a good chance that they do. Here's what the author learned about their financing, and this is from the book Terrorism, Stalking in America. The operations of many extremist groups are actually financed by corporations, which use them to stalk their enemies or potential enemies. The groups are used as the private armies of those corporations. Some countries kill dissidents, and in others they are jailed. In the United States, someone who is threatening to corporations or industries, like a whistleblower or an activist, or someone who happens to notice that his company is being targeted by law enforcement, that I added, is likely to become the target of an extremist group, or in my case, the law enforcement community. The author makes several statements that these criminal stalking groups not only harass targets specified by their leaders, but are also for hire, a kind of revenge service for those wealthy enough to hire them. These are the two distinct reasons why targets are harassed. The initial reason targets are placed on the stalking group list, then the reason the stalkers keep it up, which always involves lies. Those two reasons should always be kept separate in your mind. And that sure has been the case in my experience with David Lawson's focus is mainly on the reason the stalkers continue to harass targets. And then he comes up with a list of, it says David Lawson's chapter on selection of targets, so it may well be true, but it certainly doesn't describe the thousands of people who don't fit this list of targeted categories. Here are some of the categories of targets Lawson records in car stalking: abortion clinic workers, people guilty of mistreatment of animals,